I'm going to start the recording. Alrighty. So I'm Pam Taylor, and I am the president currently of DAMA Philadelphia. So welcome everybody to our October chapter meeting, and we're doing MDM and RDM this month. I'm going to just give you some updates from DAMA. As I told Chantel early this morning, I have quite a bit of updates to give, so I'm going to make them fast so that we can jump right in. So for those of you who have not visited the DAMA website recently, they have launched a new design. So hop on over if you have a moment and check it out. It does look nice and clean, a little bit more modern for those of us who've been around for a while. As you know, EDW 2020 just wrapped up, and it was completely virtual this year. From what I'm told, it was a success. And with that, EDW 2021, they had a limit on the call for presentations and the proposals, but that deadline has been extended. Now, I don't have the exact date on when that deadline is, but if anybody is interested in submitting a proposal and you want to have that extension timeline, please just reach out to me and I can give you the contact information. Just give me an email and I'm happy to get that for you. DGIQ is going to be held December 7th through 11th. And again, that's going to be completely virtual. There's going to be 5 half-day tutorials. My understanding is those are free. And then there's going to be 12 50-minute, just let more people in, 12 50-minute conference sessions. Now, the early bird registration ends November 5th. And if you're interested in attending, DAMA members receive a discount, and we can provide that discount code for any active DAMA Philadelphia member or any DAMA member in general. You just have to give us a shout and we can provide that to you. The last thing on my topics for DAMA updates is DAMA elections are occurring here soon. So we're voting for DAMA Board of Directors, and it's for the 2021 through the 23 season, and it begins November 1st through December 1st. There's 3 positions that are open. We have President, the VP of Online Services, and VP of Membership. 2 of those 3 positions are uncontested. The VP of Online Services and President are uncontested. And for President, they have Peter Aiken, and so he, many of you know, will be nominated and elected. And then Online Services, we have Jared Young, and he comes out of the Kansas City chapter. For Member Services, there are 2 candidates, Frank Cadwell out of Minnesota and Ron Klein from our ERMAC Toronto chapter. So I don't have any other DAMA updates at this time. I think there was quite a bit considering we haven't had too many in the past. With that, do we have our Robert Half sponsor on the line? I'm trying to look through the guest list. Amy or Chantal, do you see our, or if you're here from Robert Half, just shout. Robert Half is our sponsor today for today's session.
I believe, Pam, that they were scheduled for the end of the meeting, so maybe they're coming in a little bit later.
Okay.
I think the agenda had them for the end of the meeting.
Okay, so then we will circle back and introduce them maybe after Dalton. How's that sound? Dalton is connecting, it looks like, to audio. So maybe I spoke too quickly on the DAMA updates, trying to get everything in, fast. So I'll give Dalton a minute to connect, and then we will introduce Dalton. Zoom is so much fun. I hope everybody is having good weather where you guys are sitting.
These Zoom meetings get difficult.
Yeah, that's all right.
They really do, as people try to get in and out.
I know. All right. I don't know if everybody can hear that.
Yeah.
Dinging in and out.
That's all right. It's
All
just
right.
it's going to happen as people come and go.
Sorry.
So I have a question for you, Pam, that may apply to everybody here.
Sure thing.
Now that everybody's living in the Zoom world and they have meetings going on upon meetings at the same time and their conflicts, if people need to come in and out, how would you suggest they do that? Will somebody be able to let them back in
Yeah, so
once they leave?
I've made several people co-hosts,
Great.
and so you should be able to see, one of us will see people asking to be admitted back in, and so we will be admitting throughout. So if you have to drop and come back, no
Terrific.
problem.
Great. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. And I see somebody joined as design and execute. And I'm not sure if
maybe that's Dalton.
that's what I was just going to ask. Is that Dalton?
Yeah. I did have him for 9:30, so you might need a little bit more time to prep.
Yeah, that's not a problem. So in the meantime, I guess we can give a little bit of background about Robert Half. They are a staffing organization, and they will be on a little bit later to give some information about their organization, and they are staffing us. We have some programs coming up in December where we are going to be talking about data governance. And we have some speakers coming up. Chantel, do you want to give a little bit, maybe information about our December meeting for those who are on the line? Oh, you're on mute. Okay. Zoom is so much fun. Let's see. Let me tell Chantel she's on mute.
Yeah, sorry, I
Okay.
guess I was talking and I didn't realize I was on mute.
No worries.
So yes, there's a lot of meetings. I think we're doing a little bit more frequent meeting given we're virtual and they're half days. So we're trying to come up with ways to adapt to the new world for now. So yes, we do have multiple meetings coming up. We have a December meeting and we have a January meeting pretty much set up at this point. So I'm just going to pick up, because I have to pick up my my agenda. I don't know off my head. Okay, so in December, we're talking about data governance, and we have two very good speaker, Sunil Soers and Greg Plummer. So folks may have seen, I think Sunil previously, he came a couple of years back at the DAMA meeting, so is pretty engaging. In January, we have, we're going to be talking about data quality, and one of the topics was about social media. So we have Jennifer Red from, her perspective is how does she ensure data quality in the social media world, which is pretty interesting because we've never tapped into that topic ever. So we'll learn a little bit more about that. So We're still looking for March and May meeting topics and speakers, more to come on that, but definitely December and January will be very, very interesting meetings to come.
Thanks, Chantal. And with the current pandemic situation, our board has recently met and discussed potentially what does it look like in the new year for in-person meetings. So we are discussing that, and if you have any opinion one way or another coming back together to meet in the city or outside of the city, please feel free to send us a note one way or another, and we're happy to consider that as we prepare for the next year. We're just trying to make sure that we consider everybody's thoughts in that decision, as well as making sure that we want to make our members have the most value for their membership.
So I think, was there any price difference or reduction because of the virtual? That may be something worth mentioning.
Yeah, that is something that we are looking into, as well as we want to make sure that our members have the most value. And if we cannot offer that interaction in the way that we have in the past, and the full day sessions, being able to network and such, it may be the case that we're going to consider lowering our membership fees. Another note that was sent out is if you are having a hardship with membership dues, whether it's your corporate membership is your companies are no longer paying, or you cannot manage your individual membership, to please reach out to us. We don't want to see people drop off because of that. And so we will be happy to work something out with you. So do we have Dalton on the line? I'm not sure.
I believe I was incorrect, Pam, and that perhaps Robert Half is speaking between 9:15 and 9:30.
Okay.
Maybe are they here yet? I guess they should be jumping on
Okay.
quickly.
Okay.
Right. And maybe Chantel, if you want to try to message Dalton and let him know we're ready for him.
Yep, we'll do.
Perfect.
That might help.
Yeah, I just see him trying to connect to
Yeah.
audio. So.
Right. Bandwidth problems. And one other announcement, Pam, that I would like to remind people is that if they want to invite a guest to the DAMA community for a meeting that may be of interest to them, they're welcome to do that, and that helps expand our community as well. So if somebody wants to try DAMA for a meeting and there's a topic that's of interest to them, feel free to share it with them and reach out to us and let us know that you'd like to bring a guest or invite a guest.
Okay, I don't see the our Robert Half partners on yet. But if Dalton is able to connect, we'll just jump into Dalton's presentation, and then
Yep,
we
I
can.
sent him a note, right?
Okay, thank you. And then we can have Robert Half hop in after.
I miss those lunch and bagels and that we used to have. So hopefully we can
Yeah.
regroup at some point. I think it was a great networking event where people took a chance, an opportunity to meet other folks and learn from other companies. So I guess we're still
That's right.
learning in a new world how this will happen through just presentation at this point.
Yeah, this is the time where we would be able to meet each other and introduce where everybody's from and talk about opportunities. We were talking as well about how lots of people are having employment down shifts in their organizations. And we know that there are lots of companies that are still hiring in the marketplace. And so if you are in the market for a job, or you are a company who are hiring and you want to post that, our DAMA LinkedIn group is a place to look if you're looking for an opportunity, or if you would like to post an opportunity from your organization. If you're not a member of the LinkedIn DAMA Philadelphia group, feel free to join. And if you'd like to post a job posting within there, please feel free to do so, or you can send it to one of us and we'll do it for you. And if you're looking for a new opportunity, please reach out to us.
That's great, Pam.
Yeah, sure, we can post the link.
Yeah, we the DAMA board meet once a month, and one of the topics that we always discuss is what we think is going to be interest to the group at large. So if there are any topics that are of interest to you, feel free to email us or send us a LinkedIn message and let us know what you'd like to see in the presentations moving forward as well. I think your feedback would be helpful to us as we get our presenters together for our community. So I wonder if Dalton's in the mountains or something.
Yeah, I sent him an invite, a notification. He was targeted to start at 9:35 because typically between the DAMA updates, which usually are pretty long, and with the sponsor, we need usually typical few minutes before transitioning and setting up the sharing the desktop and so forth. But we said around 9:35. So I did send him a notification, so hopefully he sees it. Otherwise, you know, we'll probably regroup for sure at 9:30, 9:35. But I agree. We always look for topic speakers. If some of the folks in our community, what we like to hear from is experience that people can share with the group. So we don't always need somebody that wrote a book or you know, has been a high nine different name tag, but this is also a vehicle for us to learn from each other and more example and experience. So definitely, if you feel that you have a good experience that you would like to share, please let me know, and I will definitely include it in one of our meetings. And throughout the years, we have different topics, so wherever it marries the best, we can adapt. And we don't need to have always a full hour. We may have multiple speakers on separate topics that also can be beneficial for the community.
Thanks, Chantel. That was a great plug. So in the chat, I've posted the link to our DAMA Philadelphia LinkedIn group, and feel free to join at any time.
It's much more fun when we get to have our coffee together at these meetings.
Yes, it
I
is.
know. And Amy has, there's the best food, so it's always a good thing to do.
She does.
And so does many of you guys have been attending many of the virtual meetings and other, communities and events online? Because definitely we'd be looking for this year anyway. Looks like a lot of them, our meeting will end up being in this fashion. So if there's any feedback of how things works best, I definitely, and I guess Pam and the DAMA team board would like to hear any feedback.
Well, the good news is everybody can catch up on their morning email without missing anything for the time being.
Definitely. Yep. Much easier though. No traffic.
Has Robert Half joined us yet? No? Okay. Just checking.
Well, at this point, if they do join, we will have to fit it at a different time because speakers already have their own day booked outside of this meeting. So I'd like to be respectful to that as well. So.
Yep, absolutely. I see a lot of new names that I haven't seen before. So apologize for the delay. Some of our regulars are not used to, because this is new for all of us, but are a little more amenable to these kind of difficulties. But thanks for joining, for folks who joined a little bit late. And we are just waiting on our morning speaker to attend and log in. And looks like he's connecting to Oh, it looks like we have Dalton here.
Hi, Pamela. This is Dalton Cervo joining.
Hey, Dalton. Good to have you.
Hi,
Appreciate you joining us this morning. So let me give you a proper introduction. We've
okay.
had some difficulties this morning, but thank you again for joining us. So Dalton, he's the president and founder of a Data Gap Consulting. So I asked Dalton to join us because he is a highly experienced data management expert, and he is definitely well known for his MDM expertise. And I know that I personally own 2 of the books that he has authored, both the Master Data Management in Practice and his Multi-Domain Master Data Management book. So I was excited when he accepted. He is both a great speaker and a great writer, and he has lots of experience with DAMA and the DM Bach. So I don't want to steal too much of your thunder here, and I know that you've got lots to offer us today. So I would like to pass it over to you and let you go right in to your presentation.
Thank you, Pamela. Thanks for the introduction. So is it okay if I share my screen?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Okay. And all right. Please let me know if you start.
Yep, we can see.
Okay. All right. Great. Can you see my presentation?
Yep, we absolutely can.
Okay. Okay. Great. Okay. Good morning, everyone. So anyway, you know, I won't talk much. I mean, Pamela already gave me a pretty good introduction. I'll just say that, you know, if you are wondering about my accent, I'm originally from Brazil, but I've been in the U.S. for the last 25 years. I live in the Denver area, and I have been doing data management for the last 15 years or so. I was doing a lot of software development prior to that and project management and other things. But I have been in data management for the last 15 years, including several MDM efforts and data quality, metadata management, data governance, and so on. So, you know, and Pamela also mentioned, I do have 2 published books on MDM. You know, my name is pretty unique, so you can easily find me out there. So our agenda for today, then I'm going to cover, you know, pretty much the why, the what, and how of MDM. You know, I'll ask, we have about an hour. So I think, you know, the material might be, I may have to run some areas because we may have a little bit more than an hour of material, but so I'll ask you to wait for questions at the end. But if you do have a burning question, please go ahead and ask. So essentially, we're going to go through and talk about, again, the why, what, and how of MDM, because a lot of times, you know, companies don't really realize they need MDM. MDM is not very glamorous, right? So when companies think about the solutions, they think about, you know, big data, data science, machine learning, predictive analytics. Those are all pretty, you know, hot topics. And, you know, companies usually think about, okay, that's what we need. And sometimes they forget that really their solution might be MDM. And then we talk a little bit on what, you know, on what really MDM, kind of a short definition of what MDM is and how important governance is for MDM. And then we're going to get into a bit of how to implement MDM. You know, it's really not a one-size-fits-all. And there are multiple styles of MDM, and really, you know, you can actually start with one style, move into another, and we'll talk about that. And finally, we're going to finish with some of the best practices, avoiding some mistakes, minimizing risks. And throughout the presentation, you know, I'll mention some of the programs that I've been on, you know, some of my experiences. I do have experience with multiple technologies in MDM. I have experience with Orchestra, Informatica, Semarchy, SAS, Dataflux. So I'll use those to illustrate some of the concepts I'm covering. So all right, let's move on then. So anyway, why MDM, right? So like I was saying before, a lot of times, organizations don't even think about MDM, right? They have a problem and they perceive a solution that, it might be part of it, but it might not be the whole thing. So MDM may be actually at the core of this, of their problem. And so they might need to do more than just what their initial reaction is. They might, MDM could be what they solve their root cause of their problem. And to illustrate that, and then I came up with this set of user stories, just to give an idea of what that could be. So I start with illustrating what the problem is and how the perceived solution could, somebody could perceive a solution to be something, and then I talk about a probable solution which involves MDM. So if we take a very common case, right? Company says, okay, take us a week just to compile a list of all our customers. That's a very common problem. You think that would be pretty straightforward to get a list of customers, but not really. So the perceived solution might be, well, we need a new report system. Our report system is dated. We need to be able to actually, report better our data. But actually, it's possible that you may need a new report system, but it's likely that your data is everywhere. You have segmented, you have fragmented data, customer data in multiple systems. You have duplicated data across systems, and just to be able to get all that data together is very difficult. Just creating a reporting system. So MDM will then allow you to actually get this data from all those multiple data sources in a single location and have a single source of truth that then you can build your report on. So let's think about that is like why you would be implementing MDM, for example, is to have that single source of truth for your data. Another problem is our line of product is difficult to navigate and for our customers to search on. So they may think, okay, well, we need a more powerful website to improve search capabilities. Why again, that might be true, but you also may need to improve the classification of your product data. You may have to add taxonomies, and all different ways of getting your product data in line with the truth, right? With representation of what you do have in your organization. You standardize all the information. That will then facilitate your search and finding what you need, or let your customers find what you need. Next example is our employees spend a lot of time fixing data quality issues. So we may think that you need new process improvement to avoid so many errors. Now, what the best way really to avoid data quality issues is to prevent errors from being inserted into your system. So, and obviously MDM is not the only way of doing that, but it is a way. MDM system can be used to enforce data to be correct as it's entered in your organization. So that way you can proactively prevent data from getting duplicated, doing data validation, so on. And then as your data moves across your organization, moves downstream, then the data is already correct. So your quality is going to be much better overall. So another potential problem, is our organization going through a merge acquisition. We need to combine data from the companies involved, right? That's a very typical scenario as well. In this case, you may think, well, we need a very comprehensive data migration effort. Well, obviously you will need a data migration effort, but think about not simply bringing your data in as is, because, garbage in, garbage out, right? So you have to think about how you're going to improve your data as you move it through. And usually when you have mergers acquisition, the companies, they share common customers potentially. And so to be able to tie this information as you move it together is very critical. Otherwise, you have, again, fragmented data about your customers, about your partners, about your vendors. So getting all this data in a cohesive manner is very critical. So during that migration, then think about, okay, do I really need to maybe I implement an MDM system, or even sometimes you need to implement MDM techniques, right? Because there is a match and merge. There are several MDM techniques that can potentially be applied as you move the data through, and really be able to get, leverage the pros of both companies. You may have one view with one company and another view with a different company, and you might be able to then, as you move data through, then combine both and have more power to your data. Our industry is heavily regulated, and we need to make sure our IT systems are compliant. That's another potential problem. So you may think that you need to assess and plan changes to all of your IT systems. But, you gotta remember, regulations exist on data, not on system, right? Of course, the systems will help you enforce some of those regulations, but you don't necessarily have to modify every single system to comply. If you have an MDM that is actually synchronized with your other sources, you could potentially enforce the regulations and the governance and the stewardship within MDM and have that data distributed to the other sources, and you'll be already compliant, automatically. All right, so moving on next. All right, I think oh, sorry, I skipped one page. So this is a case where there's no intelligence, right, without good underlying data, right? And that's the thing about it. When I think about companies investing so much in predictive analytics, and they invest so much in all this data science and all of that, they sometimes forget the core, the data, what you really like. Because I think about like music, right? I hear a lot of Pandora, Amazon Music, all of that, and how they have all these algorithms to find the right music to pick a specific radio. But if you don't have, if your music's not, is not in the right category, it's not going to be easily found, right? So you won't be able to find what you're looking for. Any event, so let's say you have a problem where your marketing campaign is costing us too much money due to the redundant catalogs being sent to same household, delivery errors, and related shipping fines. And then you think we need a new data warehouse, a data lake to use as a source for a targeted campaign. So you think about bringing all this data into into a data warehouse, a data lake, and that will kind of solve your problem. Well, you may be bringing all this data together, but the data might be all messed up anyway. So you think of MDM being that system then that could get all this data in good quality. Again, we can use MDM to identify duplicates, validate addresses, and make sure that your household information is correct. That way you have a much better view. You can enrich your data, with demographic information. Then you can use all of that for a marketing campaign. Next problem, we can apply cross-sell and upsell effectively because we don't understand what our customers are buying. So we, again, maybe think, well, it's our reporting problem, right? Well, proper cross-sell and upsell requires a complete view of the customer and what they're buying. So if you think about, again, is that customer 360 view, but then how that ties with the products the customers are buying. And if the thing, MDM is going to be, it's not going to have transactional data in them, right? So MDM is going to have only master data, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But then you can use that master data to index your transactional data. So that way, when you have a true view of your customer, a trusted view of your customer, then you can truly understand how, what products their customer is buying, when, what are the accounts they have, and then you can decide, okay, if I have a customer that bought this particular product this time and bought this other product, I may find another customer in the same industry that is that bought this product A, and I can use that information to tie with the other customer that bought product B, and then I can offer product B to customer, to the first customer that I was talking about. So all that information that will be clearly available to you in the MDM system. So next set of problems, and this is the last page of use cases, but let's say we need to capture customer sentiment and tap to the vast social media territory. Now, first thing comes to mind, okay, we need big data, right? Technology to be able to do that. Again, while that is true, now the way big data is going to help you explore all the mostly unstructured data around social media and all of that. But you're going to have to tie that information to your own information. What do you know, again, your customer and your products that you have, how are you going to tie to that, to the unstructured data? And if you don't have good information internally, then how are you going to be able to make good decisions with all that information that you capture, right, from on those multiple sources? So MDM is going to be that system, again, that will help you understand this information before you can make sense of all the other data that you're gathering. Finally, you can think of a problem. Supply chain management needs to be more efficient to respond more quickly to customer needs. So you may think that you need a new supply chain management system and processes, but now the performance of that supply chain is really dependent on your various master data objects, right? Like your data, it goes back to, okay, your items, your products, your locations, and all of that. So if you're having consistent data, consistent management of all this supply chain data information, you're going to be less competitive. So you need to be able to have your house in order again before you can actually make sense of, or how you're going to use that information to communicate with vendors, to communicate efficiently with partners, and so on. So, okay, any immediate questions? Like I said, I mean, wait, but if you have some questions regarding the use cases, okay, all right, move forward.
I have a question. Sure. I do have a quick question, and I think those are good information. That the thing that I would say I would struggle the most in my experience is, how do you sell leadership, how to get an MDM program set up to, really they want to see the ROI. So has there been something that you've done that really helped with that?
Yes. So yeah, you brought a good point, right? Because you need a sponsorship, you need stakeholder support, you need executive sponsorship. There's actually, okay, there's a lot to talk about that actually, because ROI is going to be an important factor, and being able to get MDM in-house is very important. You can get into MDM with a top-down approach, with a middle-out, right? Those are actually going to be the two most recommended ways. The best one would be top-down. So you get executive sponsorship and make sure that they understand the problem, how governance is going to be engaging and important. So you have to start with the, what you're trying to solve? Is it risk management? Is it cost, lower your costs, or increase your revenue? So you find what is the actual problem you're trying to solve, and then you come up with a with a business case around that, and then you can take to your executive sponsorship and really present in a way that's like, okay, we need MDM for this, but you think future. But you start, it's kind of like a crawl, walk, run. So you think, okay, we can start with MDM and we can address our most critical problem, but think about how you're going to do in 6 months from now, a year from now, or 2 years from now. Kind of present in a way that you can show a result in like 6 to a year time frame, and then how you're going to improve moving forward. And how important it is to be really, my recommendation is like a top-down approach where, we have executive sponsorship from the get-go. You can even start with governance before you start with MDM, because you can do data governance without MDM, but you cannot do MDM without data governance. So a potential way to approach it would be to present to the executive team, okay, can we start a governance program where we're going to start, aligning our multiple business areas, because it's cross-functional, right? So how we can align all of this. So that's the one approach that I've taken in the past, is being able to start with governance first, where the most pain points around the cross-functional areas, present that, try to get the multiple lines of business together, and then start a conversation to start getting them to really discuss and come up with what is really hurting them the most, and then come up with the MDM system after that. I know, does that help a little bit?
It does. I mean, I think a lot of the pain point often are felt with, or, you know, with the actual team who support systems that have data quality issues and errors. So sometimes leaderships do not get the calls in the middle of the night or so forth, or the tickets that they have to be handled. So often the issue comes from the workforce supporting those systems. But how do they raise it to their leadership for them to really take action?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yes. And then the example you're talking about, like offshore teams, are they actually managing MDM, or they're managing other systems you're talking about? So,
well, they're managing systems. So, you know, there's a day-to-day operation that happens, and there's errors and this and that, and there's tickets that are open. So sometimes, you know, you'll need someone from leadership to take a look and say, okay, we're having these reoccurring issues. Could these be resolved by? Sometimes the workforce will have to educate leadership depending on the level of knowledge they have about data, because every executive may not have all the background in data. So, I mean, maybe that would be, how do you get your management to support these initiatives, or, you know, things like that, because it has to be top down to be rolled out across the enterprise or organization. Therefore, you need to have a lot of the supporting documentation or example to say the reason we're having all these issues is because of some data not being in sync and all over the place. So, yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, so, yeah, you know, that obviously it varies a lot depending on how the organization, right, and how their governance is structured, because this to me is a lot more about governance than actually MDM itself. Because what happened, you can have a centralized governance team, or you can have a distributed governance team. So a lot about that is really depending on how you're going to govern all this data being entering all these distributed areas, right? And of course, MDM system itself can help it if you actually say, okay, even though we have this, because MDM is not going to be necessarily the altering system, right? And we're going to get into a little bit more about that. But you can use MDM to manage these different altering systems, so you can actually, you know, as the problem that the data quality issues occur at the altering systems, like you're saying, you have this data quality, you can use MDM actually to validate this data. So MDM could be that point where, you know, if you to actually identify your reoccurrences of problem, right? If the errors are happening on a regular basis, then MDM system could be the point where you identify where that's happening. And then it's up to governance to be able to come up with what is going to be our process to make improvements to it. When I get to the actual MDM styles, I'll come back to this topic, and I'll use that to kind of illustrate potentially how that could be solved. Is that okay?
Definitely. Yep.
Okay. All right. So now, okay, then what is MDM, right? So MDM then, it's a business-led, IT-enabled discipline whereby an organization seeks to govern and steward high-quality master data across core business processes and systems. So master data is really that persistent and non-transactional data defining a business entity such as customer, product, location, vendor, supply, etc. So notice then the focus of business, right? A lot of times companies think about MDM as a technological solution only. You know, obviously it is there is technology involved, but it's really to solve a business problem. And so and business has to be engaged. And the most successful MDM programs that I've been, actually, they have been led by the business. And the primary reason is because MDM is cross-functional. So you can think of MDM as horizontally connecting all these silo data systems from all these vertically organized business functions, right? So you have all, finance, sales, marketing, they all operating there individually, right? So they don't particularly care about the other organizations, right? I'm saying that with a grain of salt, but you know what I'm saying? So they have their own system, their own people, they want to move on, and they have a reason for that. Now, when you actually want to implement MDM, your MDM is going to be cutting across all of that. And think of the challenge, right? Because now you have to have all these different organizations trying to agree on the definitions of terms, and they have to agree on, okay, which data is right, because they're all going to say my data is better than yours, and so we have to find owners for all of that. So it becomes really difficult. So governance, that's why governance is very important. And I was saying that a potential way of starting MDM is actually starting governance first. You start governance, you come up with what is going to be your strategy for your MDM system even before you start that, and you start understanding how that's going to impact to the multiple lines of business, how that's going to impact your existing system. To your point, and I'm sorry I didn't catch your name, the person that asked the question.
That was Chantel.
Well,
that was Chantel.
Oh, it was Chantel. Hi, Chantel.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't get it. Hi, Chantel. So,
yep.
We talked on the phone before, Chantel. I'm sorry about that. I didn't recognize your voice. So anyway, Chantel, to your point, then that we were discussing before, so like governance then can be that organization that will help you address, okay, what's going to be your process, right? Because you hear that a lot too. MDM is a business is this process, technology, and people, right? So it's going to impact everybody. It's going to impact the multiple processes. So all that is going to have to be coordinated to make MDM effective. And MDM then is going to enable this trusted view, right? So if you think about all your different IT systems out there, your ERP, CRM, order system, sales, and so on, they all have multiple information. They have customer information. They have potentially account information, product information. If you think of an ideal MDM hub with all of that, you should then be able to identify that, in this particular case, even though Robert Smith was in multiple systems, and he is married to Jennifer Smith, and he owns accounts 1, 2, 3, and product 4, 5, 6, what have you. Then you can actually then have MDM have this trusted view that is can then be used for your operational applications or for your analytical applications. So having this is the key of MDM here. Now it's very difficult to get to this point again because all those ITCs, all those organization lines of business, they're going to claim that their data is better, right? Plus, you remember all these systems, they have their own structure, they have their own information, and then you have to come up with a common set of information that will be in MDM that has to be agreed upon by everybody. So pretty challenging effort. Okay, so we can move into the how we implement MDM. Oh, and let me ask a question because I was supposed to start at 9:40, but I started a bit earlier. How much time do I have? Until what time, Chantel?
We have about till 10:45, 10:50. We want to probably have a 10-minute break between you and Mark, which is the next speaker. So.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So then I'm good actually. So I actually have plenty of time now. So if you ask questions, we can definitely feel free to ask questions. I will move through because I got more time than I expected. So it's all good. Okay. FYI. All right. So now we're going to get into how implement MDM. And I like to look at it at this generic architecture of MDM before we get into the actual MDM styles. So essentially, I mean, and this is going to be true for just about any MDM implementation, right? You have source of master data, and you have some sort of a trusted master MDM hub. And you're going to apply data quality, data governance, and stewardship, and data integration of some sort to combine the data from your sources into a trusted MDM hub. And then that trusted data can then be used by operational and or analytical systems depending on your style. Plus, the updates of the trusted data into the sources is going to be dependent, right? So not a lot of times the sources of master data are going to consume the MDM information. So And when you think about, for example, like when we compare MDM with reference data management, right, with reference data, and I know you're going to have somebody speaking about reference data, but my point on reference data is simply saying is, right, reference data is data that is used to validate other data. But because of its nature, right, that's why a lot of times people associate with master data with the reference data, is because conceptually, or even from a usage point of view, they're very similar, because reference data, there's a source, and then other systems are going to be consuming it, just like master data. And I like to think reference data is most of the time has a single source producer and multiple consumers, while MDM has multiple producers and multiple consumers. That's how I usually differentiate the two. That's not necessarily always the case. Sometimes we do actually have master data that has a single author, but typically, though, that's the way it is. Reference data has one source and multiple consumers. Master data has multiple sources, multiple consumers. So any questions on this generic architecture? Okay. So specifically now getting to the different patterns for MDM. I'm going to start then with the consolidation style MDM. And this is really a lot of times how organizations start MDM, and then they move from this into other patterns. So the consolidation style MDM is the less intrusive of all the patterns, because you actually have, well, let me stop there for a moment. There's the registry style MDM you may have heard about. I'm not actually covering registry style MDM because I haven't really seen organizations doing registry style MDM very often. So I didn't really even put a slide on registry, because registry is just creating an index, right? So we have an MDM system that indexes all your multiple sources, but you don't actually move your data from the source into MDM. MDM just becoming that index where you can locate, where you know that customer A in system B is the same as customer C in system D, right? So, and then it ties those things together. But like I said, registry style MDM is not something that I see very often anymore. That would definitely be the less intrusive of all. But after that, then this consolidation style MDM will be the next one, where it's the more common, really. And what you're talking about, the consolidation style MDM, is you have your producer of master data, where your authoring is happening. And that's usually your operational systems, your CRM, ERP, and so on. You can have custom systems where you enter your information, and then you have MDM. MDM then is going to be downstream from that. So you're going to get data into MDM, typically through ETL. Maybe once a day you get data into the MDM system. The MDM then will get this data. We will consolidate, synchronize, deduplicate, improve quality, do match and merge, do all those good things of MDM. And then you have that trusted view that I was mentioning before. And then that information can be used by the consuming systems. Now, the consumers will typically be analytical systems, but it couldn't be also operational. Maybe you do have certain operational systems that will be consuming that MDM data. In this scenario, you can use MDM to apply your stewardship. Chantel, to the point we were talking before. So this MDM could be the point if you start with it. So if you're having a lot of issues with the sources, like you're saying, you have offshore teams all entering this data in all these different locations. You can use this consolidation style MDM to start with. To say, okay, we have all these different issues, but we don't know where most of our problems are. Let's start with a consolidation style MDM. We bring our data in, and then we can identify what sources are most problems, because then you can use MDM to say, okay, if I have source, you have system A that is coming to MDM, system B, system C, we can use MDM to identify what is the most trusted source of all of that, right? Or the least trusted source. So you can identify, right then, you can use MDM to help you identify the most problematic source or most problematic team. Because then you can use MDM to be the point where you have your data quality folks, your governance folks, your stewards evaluating all this information and help you make sense and decide what system needs to be addressed. Do we need more training for a particular group? Do we need to improve certain sources? Because remember, in this particular pattern, we're not changing the producers of master data necessarily, right away. We're just saying we keep them intact. That's why this style is very less is least intrusive, because you're not modifying them. But it's giving you an opportunity to look into that data, right? And use MDM to understand it and decide what to do. Because based on that, then you say, okay, well, if this system A is the most problematic, maybe I need to implement some improvement there, or maybe I need to use MDM to refeed data back into it to fix that information. So we can make lots of decisions by just implementing this. So highlights here in this particular pattern. So typically in this case, MDM is implemented on a data lake or data warehouse. Is the typical pattern used for analytical MDM. Like I said, MDM can be used if you're applying BI, right? Business intelligence, or you're doing predictive analytics. Instead of doing for data from the source, because the data from the source could be very problematic, you can do that on MDM because you can improve it, make it better, and then you do all of that. Then you have good data that can be used for all your analytics. So it can lead to a high value in a relatively short period of time because of this low intrusive, characteristic. This is one of the quickest MDM to implement. For consumers of master data, it doesn't have to be only analytical system. They can be operational. So I've done this MDM implementation multiple times. So let me talk through a little bit some of them. So I've done this with SAS data flux using ETL. It was Informatica ETL. We have this in a data warehouse. We moved the data. We moved customer data. It was, this was my first implementation, right, of MDM 15 years ago. They still call that CDI, customer data integration. They didn't even call MDM back then. But we were bringing data into MDM, once a day. We had data in there. We used MDM to do this consolidation I'm talking about. And then that was being consumed by BI for cross-sell and upsell. They were then indexing this customer information to understand the products those customers were buying and be able to associate customers within different industry or same industries to try to identify what that customer wanted to buy next, right? So that was one implementation. I've also done this as an initial step for a coexisting style MDM that we're going to see next. But we started this as a first step. So we had multiple sources that was implementing using Informatica. We actually used Customer 360 data model for Informatica. One thing I was going to talk about as well, remember that when you're doing MDM, the structure of the data, right, it has to be, you have to fit, all the data from these producers have to fit into MDM. So MDM has to be, the data model MDM has to be designed in a way that is compatible with the sources that you're consuming. So I recommend you do like a out-of-the-box model if you can, and then customize it with what you need. So when I did this with Informatica, we acquired the Customer 360 package, which has, they come up with an out-of-the-box customer data model, which we then obviously had more things than we needed, but they didn't have certain things that we needed. So we had to customize that model, but they do provide a way of doing that. So we added attributes. We ignored attributes. But we did that, and then we use also JBoss actually as where we started with Informatica ETL to get the data in, and the plan was to move to an ESB for integration with MDM for the sources using JBoss. Any event, so we did this implementation, and we had an operational system that was new. We actually had Salesforce that was getting deployed. So we used Salesforce to consume the data from MDM. So it wasn't one of operational system. We still have some like a consolidation style MDM because the producers of master data were not consuming the data, but we did have an operational system like Salesforce consuming MDM information. And then for next step, I'll talk about in the next slide. So anyway, this is the pros of this is less intrusive because it doesn't require changing existing application. It doesn't also change your altering process. It has low impact to existing processes. The cons, the producers of master data don't automatically benefit from the improvements you're making in the hub. So if you're making data quality improvements in the hub, obviously because those producers are not consuming it, they're not going to take advantage of it, right? And also your operation efficiencies are not eliminated. So Chantel, again, back to your problem, it's like if you do have lots of issues with altering sources, you can use this as a first step to help you identify the most problematic issues or the most problematic systems and teams and so on. And then, so that could be your proposal to an executive team. You can start saying, okay, let's start with the consolidation style MDM, where it's less intrusive. We can get it, you know, if you're doing a single domain potentially, you know, using there are multiple technologies out there. I don't have any particular preference. It really depends. But you can propose to say, okay, we're going to do this as a way to identify our most critical point or data entry point or most problematic data entry point. And then we can, based on this assessment, if you may, we're going to then plan for our next step regarding how we evolve MDM. And you can even plan ahead some potential outcomes, right? Because you have an idea of what potential outcomes are, and then you can say, if we have this particular outcome, we can address this way. If we have this other one, we can address other way. So you can come up with a roadmap how we're going to evolve MDM. And I put this picture at the bottom right here because I see MDM as having three huge components, right? It's going to have a data quality component, it's going to have a data governance component, and it's going to have a data integration component. And in a consolidation style MDM, when I think about effort, right? So your data quality, don't get me wrong, you're going to have all these three in all MDM implementation, but just for comparison perspective, if you're doing this consolidation style MDM, your quality effort is going to be high because, you know, well, the reason you're bringing this data together is to make quality improvements to that data. So your effort is going to be high. You're going to have to invest a lot of time on data quality improvements. Governance is medium. The reason for that is because you're not impacting the sources, right? So you still need to understand how the data from the multiple sources, what they mean, how, you got to bring them together. You have to understand how you're going to tie all this information. So you do need some governance, but your effort is not going to be as high because you're not really changing your existing processes of entering master data. Data integration is relatively low effort because, this is I'll quote here, right? Relatively simple, right? Being quotes, right? You know how it always challenging. But in any event, this is, you can probably solve this with an ETL effort without having to require some type of a near real-time integration. So that's why I put in here effort for integration to be relatively low. And at the top, I kind of tie what are the user stories that we talked in the beginning. I kind of tie, okay, what are the potential user stories that could be solved by this particular pattern, right? So, like if I take as a week to compile a list of all of our customers, if that's a really, a huge problem for you trying to solve, you really understand your customer, but you need to understand that for analytical purposes, then that's your pattern. You create MDM, you bring the data together and you use MDM for your predictive analytics for your BI and so on. We need to capture customer sentiment and tap to the vast social media territory. Similar thing, right? You need to use MDM as your index, right, to your vast big data. So you need to be able to tie, okay, if you collected all this sentiment from across all these different social media sources, you have to tie this to your, to your internal data. So instead of going to all the different sources that you have, we use MDM to be that single source of truth and tie that information. We can apply cross-sell and upsell effectively because we don't understand what our customers are buying. I gave an example when I use, this particular pattern to implement a MDM effort to do exactly that, right? So we was using for BI to make all this understanding, to be able to offer things to customers by understanding what similar customers were doing. Our marketing campaigns costing us too much money due to redundant catalogs being sent to the same household and so on. Again, probably because before MDM, you had this data duplicated, fragmented, segmented, all those multiple sources. So it's causing you to sending all this additional money because all this information was, was not on par for what you needed. Any questions on that style? And Chantel, did that help? And we can continue your scenario. I like your scenarios, so we can continue to evolve your scenario if we need to.
Okay.
So Dalton, I have a question. It's Pam. Where in this consolidation style of MDM would you tie in metadata and capturing lineage?
Okay, so that's all right. So that's actually you wouldn't capture that necessarily in MDM, right? So I've done a lot of actually my client now. I'm doing a metadata management program using Talent, by the way, Talent Data Catalog. That's actually the system we're using that. So this really, to me, metadata management is part of an overall governance program. So if you depend on how much time you've got, right? I mean, in terms of your effort, because to me, what metadata is going to help you understand, well, what the heck is happening right here, right, with our data. So I see metadata management like as a way to understand all the data you have. So if you have the time to do metadata management before getting to MDM, that'll be great. Because what you can do, you're getting into, you can pick a technology. Again, I have no ties with any technology, right? I've done metadata management with, I'm doing now with Talent Data Catalog. I have evaluated the enterprise data catalog from Informatica and combined with Axon that they use. I have also used Meta Center as a metadata tool. But so really, that's going to be the tool that's going to help with the lineage. So because that's going to, those technologies, what they offer a way for you to go harvest your sources automatically, right? And they provide bridges. Most of them provide bridges for the most common technologies. For all the databases, and then some technologies such as SSIS, some reporting, crystal reports, or what have you, right? All those different kinds of reports systems that you have. So the technologies will allow you to go harvest those data. Can you bring all that data into your metadata repository, and which ties, right? So you have from source A goes to source B. If you have a data integration port, ETL, what have you, it's going to give you that lineage that you're talking about. So so MDM is not going to help with that, right? So, but that's a good input to MDM, because if you understand how your data flows to your organization, all the transformations that are happening, that's going to give you then input. Okay, now you understand better how how the consumption of data is, how the data flows. That will help you better plan MDM. Does that make sense? Does that help?
Well, yeah, it makes sense. I was thinking that in order to get your golden source for your master data, wouldn't you want to ensure that you had that lineage? So that's where I was looking to see where it was in your slide here.
Yeah, well, it definitely helps. I mean, you definitely, you need some sort of metadata evaluation. It depends on, you may not need a full-blown metadata program before you can do MDM. But as you develop, if you decide, like as part of MDM, okay, you decide that you're going to integrate systems A and B, again, based on your governance, right? Your governance is kind of the starting point. You're going to, once you start governance, you say, okay, you're going to decide what system you need to integrate. And you start with the business. Really, the business is governance. I see governance as being the business function, right? So the business is deciding, okay, we're going to make, here's our most pressing issue. Now we're going to decide, next you're going to decide what systems you're going to integrate. Then to your point, yeah, then you need to decide how the data flows, right? Because you need to say, okay, all right, I'm going to integrate these two systems, but where are they getting their data from, right? They may be getting the data from some other system. So you need to have some understanding of lineage. But you don't necessarily need a metadata tool completely implemented or deployed for that. You just need to understand of the flow. But your point is, yeah, you do need to understand the flow for what's impacting that MDM, what's going to potentially impact the MDM at that point.
Okay, so it's more of a prerequisite before we start into the full metadata or master data program.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Exactly. Because in MDM itself, you're not going to have that view, right? It's not going to, my point before that I was trying to make is, you're not going to go into MDM and say, oh, here's how my lineage looks like. MDM is not going to show you that, right? But yes, to your point, yeah. So you do need to understand how the data flows through the organization to understand how better MDM can fit into it.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Excellent. Yeah, sure. And in metadata, I do a lot of metadata management. So that was almost like on the whole. I've done lots of presentation on metadata management as well. So it's a whole different, completely different topic.
Oh,
well,
yeah.
not different. It's big in itself, I should say.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Sorry,
Okay.
Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, if I could ask a really quick question, Dalton. What would you say to someone who is looking at this slide and says, well, that's our data warehouse. What makes an MDM different than a data warehouse or a consolidated MDM from a warehouse?
Great question. Because, the thing I see about it, the biggest difference is the governance portion of it, because a lot of times what happens is in the data warehouse program, they say, yeah, we're going to put our data together, but it normally becomes very siloed as well. So to me, the big difference is you're not going to, so MDM, you cannot make it siloed. It's not going to be in a data warehouse where only a certain group is using it. You want to be able to benefit, to actually get the findings of MDM and use that to influence the rest of the organization. Like in Chantel's example, I want to use the results. I'm going to evaluate. So even though I have consuming systems like you have in my warehouse, but I also want to use that to create, reports or to create or to come up with a plan on how to improve the data at the source, even if it's through process improvement, right? So that to me is the critical difference. If that makes sense. Plus, a lot of times when you're doing a data warehouse program, your model is different, right? You're not doing a normalized data model. You change the model within MDM here. You still have a normalized data model, that you have. So it's not a star model like a warehouse. So it's slightly different because you're kind of looking at it as a source for moving to the next step, if that makes sense. So you're really thinking of consolidation as your first step, and to take advantage of MDM to now start feeding producers of master data in a follow-up effort. Does that help?
It helps. It still seems pretty close, a close line. And partly I'm thinking, well, if I'm talking, say at a job interview and they start grilling me, I just start trying to pick up the points. Well, what makes this special versus a data warehouse? Because I could see
Right.
in a lot of places I've worked, because I do a lot of consulting, there's one data warehouse. There's not siloed data warehouses. And usually it's just sort of
Yeah.
of data, much as you're doing here. You have your producers and then consumers and a centralized.
But you're, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
So that's,
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Sometimes there's a delay on the, sorry about that.
I understand.
So, yeah. So, yeah, no, you got a good point. But like I said, I mean, you know, it's really, to me, it's the first step to move to the next, you know, which is a data warehouse. Your data warehouse is just going to be for the data warehouse itself, even though, like you said, it may be an enterprise data warehouse, but you're pretty much, how can I, tied to just using the data for analytical purposes. And this is really thinking about moving this to an operational level MDM, which we're going to cover in the next slide.
Got it. So you could be spinning, you could be generating invoices from this, for example.
Right.
Okay. Okay, got it. Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and like I said, also the model that you're creating here, you know, is typically going to be more like of a you know, a normalized data model, as opposed to typically in the data warehouse, you might most likely you're going to have a star model, right, for your for information. So yeah, like for example, okay, moving to the next, and then and I'm sorry, what's your name?
Oh, hi. Yeah, Steve Kalnick. So, yeah, software developer.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, so and then like I said, I mean, that to me is, and that's what I see a lot happening. A lot of organizations, then we start with the consolidation style MDM, and then move to this coexistence style MDM. And if you look at the picture on the left here, it's just a little arrow, right? But that little arrow makes a huge difference, right? So we are actually using MDM now to feed back into the producers of master data. So this is something that you will not be able to do necessarily with, you know, with your data warehouse system. So so now MDM then, besides consuming data from the sources, it also is going to feed back. And then for this, typically, then your integration is going to need some type of enterprise service bus, right? Because you're going to need near real-time integration with your data. So now you can see how this becomes very challenging, because now you have, you have to have MDM being the source that, first of all, it has to be that model that I was talking before. It has to support all the different models, because what you have is the structure of the data. All these different sources are different. You have, you know, one system has first name, last name, another system has full name, another system has 5 address lines, the other has 3. So your MDM is going to have this model that is actually fits everything that you have from the source, which is very challenging. Plus, when the MDM then, when the consumers of when the operational system are going to consume data from MDM, now they have to fit that model into their model. So, plus there's timing issues, there is structural issues, and then you don't want this to become an infinite loop either, because if you produce data in system A, gets consumed by MDM, MDM updates, now it's getting sent back to system A. You don't want to make change to keep going back and forth, right? So there's several mechanisms here. Your integration effort is very high because of you have to take all those things in consideration. But that's the key difference between the consolidation and the coexistence. Now in the coexistence, you start impacting your existing system. That's why this becomes intrusive MDM. But like I said, well, maybe I haven't said yet, you don't have to do all systems all at once. So you can start with, you know, certain systems will be producers of MDM, and some systems will be producers and consumers of MDM. And then you can grow with time. So if you think of highlights, right, for this particular pattern, so the MDM hub becomes highly integrated operational systems. So it's a typical pattern to integrate multiple existing operational systems with real-time dependency of domain data. So this is the true enterprise MDM, right? Because it benefits both operational and analytical systems. It can take a very long time to implement depending on the amount of sources and systems to integrate. It requires a robust data model that can support all those integrated data systems. And data governance stewardship are very critical because, again, you know, you're going to have to get all these lines of business and the systems they use to agree on this enterprise version of their data. So the pros of this model is producers of master data automatically synchronized should improve the MDM data. Both operational analyticals are improved with this information. The cons are requires integration development to synchronize MD data with existing application. So it's high impact to existing process. So, but like I said, you know, you can start with a consolidation style, understand your main problems, and then prioritize which systems you're going to synchronize with MDM to improve with time. So back to Chantel's example, that could be a way of aligning, creating a roadmap, right? How you're going to evolve. So you're going to evolve from here to here, understand your problem first, and then fix it and keep moving on. But, you know, MDM, like I said, there's so many things you have to think about because you have to think, okay, the pattern you're going to use, you have to think about domains. You don't have to implement every single domain at once. You can start with, you know, customers, the most typical, but you can start with customer, product, you know, vendor, partner, what have you, and then move to the next. You can start with certain sources and move to the next. So there are several ways you can scale MDM, depending on sources and domains and technology and pattern and so on. Now, if you look at the effort for this one, everything is pretty high, right? Because this is so quality is high because you're going to have to put a lot of effort on the quality. Governance is high because, yeah, it's going to impact your existing systems. They have all to agree. Integration is very high because, as I said, excuse me, most likely you're going to need an ESB to real-time integration with MDM and the sources. Potential user stories. Yeah.
Quick question. Can you give us a concrete example of how, in this case, it's acting as both a producer and a consumer?
Sure. So in case it depends on attribute. So it becomes. So you have to identify what is the you know, what's your source for each attribute level. So not necessarily you're the producer and consumer of the same data. So you can be a producer. Let's say, for example, a system is the owner of customer name and mailing address, but another system may be the owner of billing address. You know, it could make your financial system be the owner of billing address, but maybe the financial system doesn't care about shipping address. So, you know what I mean? So you really have to go at attribute level and decide which one is a system of record. So it's really more dependent on system record. So one system is going to be a system of record for information A, another system is going to be a system record for information B, and then you're going to consume, you know, what you're not system of record of. Does that make sense? Does that help?
I guess so. So, because I'm trying to understand like the implementation or the usage of the MDM, because in the actual physical implementation, let's say the warehouse would integrate the system of records into the warehouse, right? So anybody consuming out of the warehouse itself would be consuming the authoritative sources, so all of the systems of record. So is this in fact saying by attribute, hey, if I picked up the shipping address versus the billing address, where did that come from?
So yeah, so MDM will have all the best data of everything, right? But your source may not have it. So let me get it. I have done for an automotive finance company. We were using data flux. We were using typical as our data integration point. We actually had a system for customer onboarding. And we had a CRM system for customer maintenance. So the system, the customer onboarding system was was in-house developed. So that's where, when they enter information in customer onboard information, so this I'll call COB, right? The COB system was responsible for certain data that would flow into CRM. But then after that, certain information would be altered in CRM itself. So MDM then, so CRM system was the consumer of the COB system for certain attributes as the customer entered. But now then after that, the CRM system will become the system of record for additional information added to it. Now, MDM would always have the latest and greatest. So if anybody's consuming from MDM directly, you would have, you know, the latest and greatest information. So you, just like your data warehouse example, right? You're consuming from MDM, you have the latest and greatest. But CRM would not consume certain information from, that was entering MDM in CRM. CRM would not consume from MDM because it was already altered in CRM itself.
Okay. In this case, MDM is the warehouse.
Yeah, MDM will, you can think of MDM as conceptually as a warehouse, but think about it like MDM again is a normalized model, right? That does match and merge techniques. So MDM has lots of techniques for doing deduplication and association of data, which is different than data warehouse techniques. So you can think of it conceptually. Yeah, they both have the best data. It depending on how much you're actually doing in your warehouse, but MDM technology has evolved to be a much more complex and much more powerful to eliminate and to associate data, because a lot of times you need match and merge, you need to have probabilistic matching, deterministic matching. All these matching techniques don't necessarily happen in a data warehouse. So MDM technologies have evolved to help with those matching techniques and to help you better understand, you know, the commonality of your data. So to me, the key difference is the technology that is being provided by the MDM tools to have all this information. So you can think of it conceptually again as the same thing, but when you implement it, it's different, right? Because of all the additional features that are provided by the MDM system.
Okay, so can I consider MDM to be more like a conforming zone where all the raw data comes in, and then I conform all the data and actually clean it up and figure out who the authoritative sources are before I put it into a cube format for actual data for user consumption?
Yeah, that you could think of it that way. Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But like I said, MDM tools are very powerful and they're getting much better, right? Because of all these different techniques, especially for match and merge. So if you're gonna, if I was gonna say what's the most important feature of an MDM, just the technology itself, right? I would say the match and merge, how you're gonna match things around. And then MDM has, like I said, there's different algorithms, and depending on the tool, like I said, they're gonna have deterministic, because you're trying to minimize false positives and false negatives, right? It's all these different technical ways of matching data. You don't want to overmatch, you don't want to undermatch. Depending on the usage, if you overmatch, like think about, you know, if you have a bank account, right? You don't want to overmatch. You don't want to have two people think they're the same and you give them access to the other account, right? But also, so MDM is going to be powerful in that sense. Plus you have this enterprise data model, right? That is it can then be used to be consumed by the other sources. Make sense? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sure. All right. And finally, I have the centralized style MDM. So I've also done this before. So centralized MDM is where MDM is the altering system and all the systems consume of it. So if you think about that, would be great, right? That would be the ideal scenario where if everything could be done this way, where you enter the data directly in MDM, it's nice and clean, governed, all great, and then it's consumed by everybody else, great, right? But this is really, it doesn't happen too often, to be honest. It's very difficult because you already have other systems running. You're not going to move all those processes, and plus, like MDM is not ever going to have all the data that all the systems carry. MDM is going to have a subset of data. It's going to have just a subset of master data. And so it's relatively impossible in a way to have MDM being that authoring system for everything you need. Now, I have done this before. I have using Orchestra to implement a location domain where I had this automotive organization. They would use MDM as their location master. So they use Orchestra to enter their data. So it was the authoring system was MDM, and then we used MuleSoft for their integration to actually send all the location data to all the multiple consumers of master data. So in this case, it's almost like MDM is a reference data, man, right? Because you have one producer of data, multiple consumers, like I was saying earlier, but it's still master data because it's not data that's used to validate other data, but it's, you know, it's master data, but it has a single source, a single authoring system. So authoring happens in MDM, consumed by other systems. Data quality effort is relatively low because, you know, you actually, the rules, you don't have to do multiple rules for matching all the data across, right? You create a rule, okay, when you enter data, it has to have this quality. You can enforce it right there, and then you're good. Then the consumer system will take advantage of it. So it can be used to collect and distribute external vendor data. I've used this before as well, where MDM system was, we had automotive information from VIN numbers and so on from cars, and we had the MDM system being, it's more like, this is more like the reference data, right? We had data coming from a vendor that we use that to distribute to sources, and they use that to validate other systems. So data governance stewardship to collect data is simplified, but it still requires large effort to coordinate acceptance by all consuming units. So we still need governance to get all the sources to agree on what that's going to look like. So if master data for a particular domain already existing managed system, moving altering to MDM can be highly expensive. So like I said, let's say if you already have location, right, in this particular example I was giving, if you already had multiple systems are doing altering of location data, and now if you decided to move all that to MDM, and they're just going to consume that data, so it can take time to integrate that as well. So from an effort perspective, so quality, again, this is just effort, right? Not that the quality is going to be low, it's just the effort for quality is medium because, like I said, you can make enforcement and create rules directly in MDM and be enforced, so you don't have to make a lot of changes to other systems because they're already going to consume good data from MDM. Governance effort is still pretty high because you still have to have all those sources consuming data to agree on what that master data structure is going to look like. Integration effort is pretty high because most likely if you're doing this, MDM is going to be, you know, critical system operational, has to be integrated with the ESB. So it's a pretty large effort for integration as well. So pros, MDM better enabled to manage altering, right? So since MDM is done for that, you can enter your data. The mechanisms for guaranteeing good data to come in are already there. And it's ideal pattern for, like I was saying, for reference data management because you know, it's one producer, multiple consumers. And the cons are MDM typically has to support a large number of attributes, I mean, for this case, right? So because, like I was saying earlier, MDM is not going to be able to, not going to have a huge number of attributes, but if you're going to implement this, like in this example I was providing, location attributes, we had like 150 attributes related to location, which is too many really for an MDM system to manage. So typically that's, yeah, for a centralized model, you're going to have to put a lot of attributes in MDM, which is not ideal. Cons, existing application process have to be heavily modified because now, if before they were altering data, now they have consumed from MDM, that's also can be a high effort. Any questions? Okay, and I know I'm close to the end of my time here, so I only have one more slide to cover. But like in a summary here, then the 4 patterns that I talked about, I just mentioned registry, right? Because like I said, this I don't see it happen very often. And then we talk about the consolidation style MDM, the coexistence and the centralized. Hopefully I provided some real examples here with some technology that I've used to implement those. I have used, like I said, for data integration, I've used Typical, MuleSoft, JBoss, from a ESB perspective, Broome as well. From a ETL perspective, I have used SSIS, Informatic ETL. Like I said, I mean, I'm not tied to any technology. It's going to depend on your case. Whatever the organization already has, some of those you can leverage. From MDM technology perspective, I use SAS Data Flux. I've used Orchestra. I've used Informatica, and with Informatic with the out-of-the-box Customer 360 data model. I've used Semarchy. I've done this for technology, for healthcare, for financial, both banking and automotive industry. I've done this for rental industry, auto rental industry. What else? Multiple industries and organizations. All right. So finally, then, just to conclude here, some of the best practices: avoiding mistakes and minimizing risks. And I don't know why my slide's not moving. Come on.
It's just been
My
that kind of
screen
a
froze
day.
here. Yeah, I know, right? I don't know why my screen seems to froze. You guys are still there, right? So that's
Yep.
good.
We can still see your slide 19.
Yeah, what's happening? My screen froze here. I don't know why. Everything is froze. Okay. All right. I think it's my PowerPoint that went crazy. Let's see if I. I'm really sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
No worries.
So. Let me try to do something real quick here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my PowerPoint froze, apparently. Okay. All right, good. At least I'm out. Let me restart my PowerPoint real quick.
Sure thing.
All right. All right. Good. Can you guys see it again?
Yep, sure can.
All right, good. All right. And go my last. All right. Yeah. Okay. All right. So best practices: strong business case and executive sponsorship. Like I said, MDM is going to be very expensive and disruptive. So you're going to need a very strong business case to get sponsorship and funding. Like I said, my best recommendation is to you kind of think ahead, plan for the future and start slow. Kind of, don't try. I've done this before. Organizations try to do too much very quickly. They were trying to do operational MDM, or the coexistence style MDM for customer, for vehicle, for location, all at once. That was too much, and needless to say, they had a lot of pain. So I would recommend. So think about, like I said, invest into strategic planning, right? It's not only about vendor selection, but there's many ways to implement MDM styles, sequence of domains, source systems, and so on. So understand all that and plan like in steps, how we're going to move from here to there and so on. Engage the business. So that's critical. MDM is not a simple technological solution. A lot of times IT takes the lead, but which is fine. But keep in mind that MDM business has to be part of it. Data is owned by the business and serves a business purpose. So it's not quality for the sake of quality, right? It has to be quality to serve a business purpose. So the business must be engaged to really understand what the data is used, and it's not going to be 100% ever, right? So, but how good is good? Establish a data governance organization. So MDM will impact cross-functional organization. So MDM governance is going to be key to break all those vertical silos and ensure that data is treated as an enterprise asset. Like I said before, MDM governance can exist without MDM, but not the other way around. And you can even start governance before you even start MDM. Select the right MDM technology for your business case. So it's not necessarily have to pick a top technology. There's a huge difference in prices in technology. We compare, like Informatica is very expensive. I've done Informatica, I've done Semarchi. Semarchi is a lot cheaper, and I had cases where Semarchi was perfect solution for what we needed. So you don't have to go with the most expensive, top on the Gartner quadrant for what your problem is. So plan for multi-domain, even if you start with single domain. A lot of times companies start with customer or product, and so so we can start with one domain, but plan for next, plan for multiple, right? Because that's truly what's going to give you a complete view. Like I do banking systems, it was very important for us to understand, not only the customers, but also their accounts and their financial accounts and so on. So it was very important to think about multiple domains. Engage the right partner, because MDM is going to be pretty complex. So chances are you need help planning, strategizing, selecting the right technology, and with your solution. So a partner that has built MDM before is going to be really important. And I think maybe I have gone a little bit over my time here, but that's what I had. Any additional questions?
Yeah, we probably want to, wrap up probably within the next few minutes, as we'll have Mark joining around 11. So if anybody has questions, it's probably a good time. Otherwise, we'll probably have a quick break in between to just give a chance for folks to attend to a few things before coming back and resuming at 11.
Okay, so
Okay.
I don't see any questions in the chat, Dalton. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Okay, yeah, you're welcome. Right.
If you don't mind, we'd like to, if you could share your presentation, we'd like to share it with our membership.
Sure, I did send mine already to Chantel. So
perfect.
Yes.
Great.
Okay.
So we're going to go ahead and share that with our membership. And if everybody would like to take a bio break, we can resume at 11. I will keep the line open so you can hop back on whenever you're ready. I'm going to turn my camera off though, so I can go ahead and take a bio break myself.
Thank you.
All right.
All
right.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
See you around 11.
Thanks,
Thank
Dalton.
you.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, bye.
And we're back. Okay, so Mark, whenever you're ready, Chantel, go ahead and do the introduction.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Hi, everybody. Just want to say that we have a great leader here in RDM, reference data. As you can see, the presentation that's already posted. So Mark has been a leader in this space for 25 plus years, and he's currently with PMI, Project Management Institute. So we will hear from him a lot of great information about reference data. And if you have any questions, I guess Mark will probably entertain them. I'm not sure if you'll have them at the end of the session or throughout the discussion, but just want to turn this over to Mark. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me today. And hopefully everyone will get a few nuggets of good information out of this presentation. So again, we'll be discussing reference data, and I'm going to be talking more about the business aspects of reference data versus the technical aspects of reference data. Okay. So I don't know, for some reason my full screen doesn't seem to, oh, there it goes. Now it's cooperating. Can you see the, what are you seeing? Are you seeing just my slide? Or are you seeing the next slide
We
also?
can see
Your
the speaker
bio.
slide. Yeah.
Let me see here. When things just don't want to work today.
It's been that kind of a day.
Yeah. Let me see here. Yeah, nothing's cooperating.
Maybe if you
I might just reduce it. I mean, it may be easier for you to see that. Does that work okay for everyone? Otherwise, I can continue to play around with this thing. I just don't want to lose half of our time.
I believe if you go back to the display and then
do that. Okay.
And then in the three dots, if you hit hide presenter view.
There we go.
Oh, maybe not.
I'm telling you, it's the same day for me. Nothing is, nothing really wants to cooperate. So can everyone
we'll work
see,
with it.
Yeah, if everyone can see this, let's work with that. Yeah. And so let's get started. So as I mentioned, my name is Mark Broome. I work for PMI. I started with the organization 2.5 years ago, and I was sort of hired there for the sole focus of making the organization become more data-driven. With the executive management team recognizing that in the world that we live in now, if you're not data-driven and you're more transaction-driven, you're going to end up running into some severe problems and likely become obsolete. So in this role of the Chief Data Officer within PMI, I sort of cover the entire stack of the data and analytics. It includes all the 24/7 operations. It includes database administration, data engineering, data architecture, data quality, data governance, visualization, and I have data scientists that do both predictive and prescriptive analytics. And over that 2.5-year period, we building out the operating model, the org design, sourcing model, and the underlying technology to be able to support this vision of what the future will look like for PMI. Previous to that, I worked at Shire Pharmaceuticals, and that's where I really got to be more intimate with data and analytics. I created their data and analytics organization, was very much involved also with a lot of the acquisitions that Shire performed until they, in fact, were acquired, handling the IT integrations, and also started at Shire as their Chief Technology Officer. Previously, I spent 8 years working for Gartner. In that role, I managed the Northeast practice, private sector, and really had a huge opportunity, I felt, of working with probably over 100 companies on developing strategies and implementing strategies. And I think that gave me a really good foundation for the work that had to be done at Shire and certainly at PMI. And then previous to that, I got my feet wet with technology right after I graduated from engineering school, working on Wall Street for companies Morgan Bank, Goldman Sachs, and Lehman Brothers, and had a stint with startup and other organizations along the way. So I guess I'm aging myself. Maybe that's the point of that conversation. Being at PMI, we like to spend a lot of time working with companies. The nice thing is being an association, similar to what we have here. We generally don't have any competitive issues we need to deal with, which provides us the opportunity to share a lot of information. I do spend a good amount of time with leading companies in innovation, whether it's Google, Microsoft, and others. And again, we'll look to do the same to really anyone that's interested in sharing You'll see on the right-hand side, you'll see that quick response, that barcode. You can snapshot that or just reach out to me on LinkedIn if you'd like to share. Again, that's whole part of what we do as associations, right? Okay, so that's who I am. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with PMI, Project Management Institute. We are the world leading organization when it comes to project program and portfolio management as a profession and building out that association. We're best known for something called the PMP, which is recognized as a gold standard for certification. We have over 1.5 million people that hold that certification. And just of early this year, the largest country with holders of PMP, in fact, now is China. We do operate in all the regions around the world. We have offices in China, Singapore, Lebanon, and also London. And we do have coverage also in Latin America and Africa. We have 300 chapters around the globe, again, serving the same purpose as this association does, is bringing like-minded people together where they can share their professional experiences and personal experiences and build relationships. We also have over 100 online courses that are available to our members, and also a lot of publications and event assets. We also have a very large volunteer base of over 10,000 individuals. So that's who PMI is. One of the things, anytime I start working for a different industry, I always like to understand what the history is, because you can learn a lot from that. And I always find it fascinating. Hopefully you do too. Is if you go back to professional associations, it's viewed that they actually started in the Middle Ages with something called guilds. And these guilds were really incredibly powerful in what they did. And they really controlled the trades. And in the trades, they coined the terms such as journeyman, apprentice, the master craftsman. And the whole premise behind that is how one would build their experiences over time to eventually become a master craftsman. So when you start hearing those words, you know that actually started from the Middle Ages. And the apprentice was really more the sort of the, I'm going to call it the grunt worker that did, most of the heavy lifting. The journeyman, they would actually progress from that. And the reason they had the name journeyman is because the expectation is that these individuals would travel around the country working with other craftsmen and basically learn through that process. And eventually they'd become master craftsmen. So the guilds as we know it today no longer exist, and probably because they became obsolete and they became irrelevant. And that was for a couple of reasons. Certain things happened over time which changed the control of power and their role. Number one is they were really big into a caste system, how one could even become involved with the trade based on who you may be, where you were born and what family you were born into. And if you go back to sort of some of the similar situations, but much worse at the time, the Black Plague, 50% of the population passed away in France and Germany and Europe. And that sort of made change to how people then would get involved in these trades, since there was a big supply and demand problem. The other thing that was interesting about, the guilds is their level of control. This whole premise that these journeymen would travel around, everyone would freely share information. Well, about the 1500s, 1400s, all of a sudden things like patents came along, and these tradesmen who are also businessmen say, wait a minute, I just have to give away this information. So that had an effect on the guilds. And lastly, the thing that changed it is people were thinking more of, hey, I'm just going to train this person. I actually want to build out a company. And I want to build this employee-employer relationship. So that all led to changes and transformation, which arguably made them become obsolete. And then obviously new organizations grow out of that where there's gaps. And the reason I'm focusing on it is because we now are in a situation where I see a similar transformation, what I'll get into. But the professional associate is not a small industry. There's over 1.25 million people that are employed with trade associations, professional associations. And brought $140 billion of revenue annually. Nonetheless, we are under siege, just as many professional associations are under siege if they don't adapt and adjust. And obviously, this association is adapting and adjusting just by the mere fact that we're sitting here today having a virtual conversation, which more likely a year ago was really being held in a physical location. So some of the things that we're absolutely seeing changing is, one, how people credentialize themselves today. Certainly when I started my career, certification was really big. I did hold a PMP at the time, But now if I'm a software developer, as an example, and I'm a candidate for a job and want to be hired and they're interviewing me, I'll probably point them to my GitHub and saying, hey, let me show you some of my code that I developed, in particular, maybe in machine learning for the work that I do in Python. Communities are changing. It's no longer just physical, it's a lot more as virtual. And one can just go to a meetup and set up their own community, on the spot. Big change. Learning, so much of this is online today. Vis-a-vis physical space. People are adjusting to that. It's become even much bigger with COVID, which I'll talk about. And probably the most important thing is the expectation of millennials and Gen Zs. They've been brought up with a lot of digital capability. They sit there on their phone, a phone like this, and say, geez, give me personalized experience. You go to Netflix and what do you see? You see recommendations based on what you've looked at in the past and people that are similar to you. And says, hey, this person watches the same stuff you do, but they also watch these other 3 shows and they liked it, so you'd probably be interested in that. That's their expectation, and they really want little effort to get to what they want. And we all have to build that experience if we want to keep up with the Joneses and keep up with in the corporate space. The last thing that we've really been affected by is COVID. Again, certification is one of our largest offerings, and to get your PMP, there's obviously a lot of studying, but then you have to take an exam. That exam is tightly controlled. And previous to this, those exams were taking place in physical locations across the globe. Well, obviously, with the closure of these locations, we had to find different ways for people to take these exams. So now we're seeing a lot more headway, and we've really pushed heavily into proctored online exams. So the key takeaway of this slide is, one, so it's nice to understand the history, but more important to see how things transform. And if you don't transform, then you're going to run into some really substantial problems as an organization. In this case, it's really digitization is that transformation. And with the digitization comes the importance of understanding your customer, and understanding your customer means you have to have good data. And part of that will come into the reference data, which I'll talk about. Okay, so hopefully this makes sense, and we'll go on to the next slide. So where I end up spending a lot of my time is thinking about how we're going to be leveraging data to drive a better experience for our customers. And we're doing it in a number of different ways. One, we are right now building out recommendation systems so we can provide a personalized and engaging experience for our customers, especially what we call our next gens, who are, younger in age. They just graduated. They've got experience, maybe 5 years experience. And we're at the point of we're building also a new digital platform. And when that digital platform goes online, we will have recommendation engine in there so we can provide them more targeted content. We are using machine learning for customer retention and acquisition. And this allows us to understand probability curves of the likelihood that somebody is going to leave us. And when we start seeing a high level or low level, we will probably then want to reach out to them and target different marketing campaign and better engage them to really reduce the likelihood of them churning. And same with acquisition. Is we bring on somebody new that comes into our websites, we want to find different ways and different channels to attract them to become a member. As we mentioned, we have chapters, over 300 chapters, and a lot of work maintaining a chapter. And up to now, it's really an individual said, I'd like to start a chapter and work with them to establish that chapter. Our vision of the future is quite different, that through geospatial data and machine learning, we can figure out and target where we should establish chapters where it'll have the greatest impact for our customers and our members. All of our marketing is completely being reworked, where rather than giving generic marketing, it's very much going to be more targeted to the client base we're going after, and doing more forms of more complex multivariate analysis to determine which messaging is working the best way for different customers. And we're doing a lot of real-time business performance management. And again, in that regard, what we're doing is we're taking all the social data we receive, we're taking our customer care calls we get, which is, can be 50,000 a day, honestly. And we take that information that goes into our NLP system, natural language processing, and we provide sentiment scores, we provide effort scores, and we can immediately respond to when we're seeing problems and issues that our members are having and react to those. And at the end of the day, what we're looking to do is ensure that everything that we're doing has an outcome, but it's got to be as measured by, frankly, if you got an outcome, you can't measure it, it probably really isn't a good outcome to begin with. So that's really what's happening within PMI. And the reason I'm mentioning this is that without really good reference data, weren't able to do some of the things that we need to do. And we'll get into that in more detail. Okay. So far, so good for everybody? Everyone can hear me okay? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So reference data, a real simplistic definition, I've just yanked it from Wikipedia, is data used to classify or categorize other data. So what I want to do now is I want to talk about all the challenges that I certainly encountered when I started working at PMI and some of the areas of focus in terms of making our reference data more usable. So what you'll see on the screen here is on the left-hand side, it'll talk about some of those challenges. I'll go into that in more detail. On the right-hand side, we're going to be looking at some visuals to give you some real-life examples of the different challenges. The first I'd say is that as an organization, we were building products in silos. And we were building products in silos, so software developers would build out systems to perform transactions to support that product. So that product could be certification, that product could be membership, that product could be chapters. And because they were working in silos, they also built their own reference tables. And that posed a real challenge for us, and we'll get into that in more detail. The second area that we ran into is the data, again, was designed around supporting the transaction. In many cases, was viewed as sort of a byproduct of supporting that transaction versus being a real asset, which has its challenges because it means it's not being maintained and leveraged. The involvement of the data team. Anytime they got the data team involved, it usually meant that there'd be a lot more planning, a lot more engineering, because we're taking that data, we're moving it downstream so we can derive value of it and support the entire enterprise with that data. So again, that was a big cultural change, saying, wait a minute, this data is being used in a different way and others are going to need to be involved as we build the systems in the future. And when I started, there was no sense, or there were no data stewards, there were no data owners, and default, it seemed to fall into IT's hands. So on the right-hand side, what you'll see is some real-life examples of areas that we've encountered with reference data and tables that have posed problems for us. The first is on the top. If you look at the ISO standard for a country, it's got a 2-digit or 3-digit code. We'd have System X that was using a 2-digit code. System Y was using a 3-digit code. And over time, they had to actually communicate with one another, and we ran into an incompatibility there. So they weren't able to communicate. The second problem that we ran into is that when people were building out their reference tables, in this case, I'm giving an example of a region, what we would do is we take and we consolidate countries into regions. So that region 1 would be North America. We put Puerto Rico at System Y, which again, one could be the certification system, the other could be membership. We would find that the region of Puerto Rico ended up in Latin America. And now all of a sudden we want to get a consolidated view of what's happened in the region, and now we've got a mismatch. Okay. And again, that's another issue that we ended up having to contend with, mainly because of the silo area that we worked on. Then I got some really more interesting sort of nuanced issues that we've had to deal with. As I mentioned at the top with Taiwan, another example of that is here we've got an issue with Taiwan, which again is one of our customers. And when we have a drop down, what do we present? Obviously, in one case, if you're Taiwan, you'd want it to be Taiwan. Seems innocuous. However, the Chinese may say, you know what, that's a Republic of China. You should be representing that in a different way. So again, another business problem that needed to be dealt with. We also ran into issues with when you break down from country. For us, it's state. For other countries, it's not state. It might be province, parish, or district. And what we found is we were very US centric on how we were building out our technology and how we're building out our tables and how we're building out our templates. So a good example of that, in Brazil, we would write state. It was a free format, and they were viewing that as sort of like a state of mind. They weren't thinking about a province. And lo and behold, we then want to use that information for analytics, and it's sort of useless to us. The last thing, which was a interesting business problem, is what default language do we use for our country? So in areas of Africa, you may have a reasonable split between French and Arabic, and you've got to be very careful. You may offend one versus the other, depending on your default language. And the key points that I'm making here is a lot of these issues were business-related issues. For company, again, we allowed for company. We didn't really have any reference tables. in this regard, which we have now built and we're incorporating, where people would put free format for the country. So as we begin to understand, and we do a lot of our analysis based on, hey, what country or industry are our members, weren't able to do that because nothing matches. The same thing occurred with asking people what industry they're in. They would give us a company because free format, would ask them what organizational function they work, and they might give us IT, even though they don't really work in IT, they worked in that organization because the way it was described was poor, and we'd have somebody's job role, in many cases would get their title. So all of these are business problems, and if you don't build out the table, and more important than the tables, my key point is you also got to provide the descriptors to get the right data and right information. And these are the issues that we've been contending with, and I'll explain to you how we're organized to deal with some of these problems. Is everyone sort of following that? Okay, that point. And again, I could go into a lot of reference tables that, you know, whether it's product master, customer matter, all MDM stuff, I won't touch into that. Otherwise, we'll get too far afield. So why does this really all matter? Well, it's that stuff that's circled on the top of why it really matters, and especially that area where we're building out customer insight dashboards and predictive and prescriptive models. All of our dashboards, you know, are quite capable in providing insights. And the way that they work, they're meant to be able for different teams to be able to say, geez, you know, I really want to understand what's happening within this region. I want to understand what's happening with these people that have this job title. What about what industry they're in? How are we doing in terms of people that are in accounting versus how they're in a different part of the organization? If the reference tables are not working correctly, these dashboards don't work correctly. And we've invested a huge amount of time in cleanup, getting the reference tables addressed, and also really working with the business to do that and taking ownership. Our predictive models, same story. Our predictive models and predictive models are getting better and better, but one of the biggest challenges that we have is the data quality in these reference tables, that we're finding that, geez, this person has this industry and they're not really in that industry, as an example. Or we end up having data analysts who are more junior and they want to look at a country and they're finding that the country name isn't right, the country code's not right, and that also has an effect on us. So that's why it's circled on the top, and you can see it's a relatively complex system, no different than most everyone that's sitting here too with their organization, that we take a huge amount of data. We take behavioral data from the web, we're taking financial data, we're taking social data, we're taking third-party data. We're mashing it all together to feed some of our core systems. Those then end up going into our data warehouse and our data marketplace to deliver back to our analysts. And our analysts, again, exist in my organization in each of the functional areas, which I'll get into. And these are each of the key components that make up a good data marketplace and data that's valued so we can gain the analytics that we need. So to deal with this challenge, one of the key areas of my focus was how do we establish an operating model and a structure to fix this? So I'm going to go sort of to the far right, is that we ended up looking at different organizational operating models. There's three effectively that you can choose from. It's really, do you want to be centralized where everybody with that same competence sits in the center? Do you want to go fully decentralized where every function, you know, does whatever they want? Or do you go into the hybrid model? This hybrid model is a lot of competencies that are delivered in the center, and also there's competencies and capabilities delivered in the spokes, which be in the functions and the regions. And we opted for this hub and spoke federated model to support the organization. And in doing so, we have now been able to deal with some of the issues of the data stewardship and the reference table. So our reference tables are not owned by the COE, which is, you know, which I'm responsible for. It's actually owned by the functions. And the functions have data stewards and data owners that are answering a lot of the questions that I posed to you in the previous two slides. How do these reference tables, how do they work? How do we agree on what the ISO code is? How do we agree on that Taiwan versus the Republic of China? How do we agree on the companies that should be included in that drop down in the future? And let's be clear on how we're defining job titles. which again is a complex question into itself. So that's one thing that we did, is we established again this federated model. The other thing that we did is we invested a lot of time in training data analysts. In our case, we happen to use Tableau for the data analytic work that we do in the visualization. This could have easily been Click. It could have been Power BI. Frankly, I could have used either of those technologies. They would have worked just fine for us. But the number one point is we standardize on one technology, and that was really important to us. Because what we do is these data analysts, we train them on Tableau. And Tableau, we go through two 8-week training courses, and we leverage something called Udemy. And what happens with Udemy, we'll work them through certain sessions. And after those sessions are done, we bring them all together. It was we brought them together physically, now it's virtually. And what we do is we then test them, and they get to demonstrate their knowledge and experience. However, rather than hitting this beautifully choreographed data that's available to them from this Udemy course, they now attack our data that's available to them on our data marketplace. And that's where the real learning happens. And it also allows us to build really tight relationships with these data analysts. So that way, when they look at this hub and spoke, which can happen in a lot of organizations, it can turn out to be contentious. It can also be a problem if we allow them to run wild. They won't follow certain standards. They'll also probably get frustrated because they're not going to understand all the areas that they have to consider about data stewardship, data ownership, and reference tables. So as we're training them in this visualization, we spend a lot of time with them training them on data stewardship and in the importance of data quality. So when they go back to their functions, they're reinforcing the message of the COE. So now if I move to the left, you'll see this, I guess it looks like a house, is that what we've structured, we have structured a center of excellence in enterprise and data analytics. It consists of a lead. I happen to be the lead, and our council members. Our council members are included all the leads of the key functional areas. That includes finance, it includes product development, it includes strategy, it includes customer care. And we work together when we have to make strategic decisions across the entire enterprise. And that's worked really, really well for us. And we meet on a bi-monthly basis, and we'll go over key topic areas and key areas where we have to make global decisions. Underneath that, we have a data management IT liaison group. In this case, the area of focus is the data stewardship and the data ownership. And that's really where we make certain decisions with respect to how we're going to manage our reference data and what's going to be included in our reference data. Our data engineers and data architects really work with our application architects to determine how we're going to deliver this reference data. In some cases, we have some legacy systems. What we'll do is we'll put our reference data, we'll put it on our data governance platform. And in that case, they can download it. The other thing we're building out is API, so they can access that information via the API. We could potentially leverage our MDM tool. We happen to use Informatica, but based on the cost benefit, we've decided that these other two approaches are probably the best way to go. Data quality, everyone owns data quality. The data stewards have responsibility for the data quality in those functional areas. The data quality folks that we have use tools to assess the data quality, and also where we're doing more using third-party data to clean and populate data. The data quality leads will in fact work with our data architects and data engineers to help cleanse that data and fill gaps that we don't have. On the bottom, I covered most of that, as we have the data analysts, as I mentioned. Those do fall into the function for visualization engineers. We do have visualization engineers that also work at the center and the core, and where we're developing more complex visualization dashboards, that work is done at the core. And then what we look to do is we then look to cross-train those data analysts in the function so they can then take over those dashboards moving forward. Business analysts is totally federated. We have a number of business analysts that work for us at the core visualization analysts I covered. And the data scientists, those at this point all work for the core. We find that bringing these individuals together and sharing has turned out to be the right thing for us. Maybe in the future, as we advance, we'll have data scientists and functional areas, but right now we don't see that. So hopefully this slide gave you an understand how we're organized and how we're tackling some of the reference data business issues based on a really strong structure of how our operating model works and how we're organized for success. So in summary, what are some of the key takeaways, hopefully, that you'll leave with? Is one, the reference data needs to be treated as an enterprise asset. If you remember previously, I was talking about how we were operating in silos. People were building their own reference data, and when it came to building out these composite dashboards, they simply didn't work. The only way you're going to treat this in a way that makes a lot of sense is to really look at that as enterprise assets. The reference data has significant implications on the customer experience. Again, we are building out these predictive and prescriptive models, which are designed to deliver information to individuals based on their career journeys. And if we don't understand their career journeys, we're going to deliver the wrong data to them. And how we capture that is through some reference data. Ownership and stewardship is a business responsibility. And I guess the two key points here: if you don't have the CEO and the executive management accepting this, it'll be a challenge. So one of the things you're going to have to do is you're going to have to get those individuals at the top to agree on this structure, and then agree that the data, in fact, is owned by the business, is stored by the business. And in this case, whether it's IT, I'm not in IT, or the Center of Excellence, which I am part of, will contribute and also orchestrate the stewardship activities. Architecture, technology, and tools do play a supporting role in this. And my key point there is I can put an MDM. We put an MDM last year. And in fact, the organization won an award from Informatica for 2020 of the work that we did there and how we delivered in 90 days. But frankly, it's all these other supporting roles that's going to make the success. It won't be these tools unless you get that straightened out. And again, if you want to have really good reporting and analytics and AI, you're going to be dependent on reference tables. So you make sure you get those things right. Otherwise, all the other stuff will probably fall apart on you. So that's really what I wanted to cover with you over this period of time, and leave a bit of little time for questions if anyone has any questions for me.
So this is Pam. Hi, how are you?
Hi, Pam.
When you were talking about ownership of reference data as a whole, and I think it was on either slide 8 or 9.
Yeah.
If you don't mind just jumping back to that slide. Yeah, I think it was slide 9.
You want that one? Is that one for you?
Or
was it with the this one?
Yeah, I think it's that one.
Okay,
Yep.
there you go. Sure.
When you were talking about that, and you had mentioned that, I believe it's in the current client you're working with, and you had said that as a whole, and maybe I misheard, but as a whole, the ownership of the reference data management is at the program is not owned by one single area? Or?
Oh, no, it is. We define someone that owns it.
Okay.
Because if you don't, if nobody owns it, then, I mean, if multiple people own it, nobody owns it. So absolutely, sorry if I,
that's why I was like, did you say
it's a single person that owns it. Otherwise, you're
Okay, good. I thought you said that it was a shared ownership, and I'm like, I could see the tables maybe being owned by multiple people, but the program itself. Okay. So where did you say that is, the program is owned? Is it in the?
Well, also, by the way, the tables are owned by a single person too. Let me be clear.
Yeah, each individual, I would assume that each individual table would be owned by a single person, and they would be accountable for updates as they are required.
Correct. In orchestration, for example, if you look at how we define what countries are in which region, that can be somewhat fluid.
Mm-hmm.
And we may have a managing director says, I've got this, I'll use, since I had Puerto Rico in there, I'll talk about Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, because it's, more closely tied to the US, I think it should be US, or the US may say, I want this. And in the counter, they'll say, hey, you know what? They speak Spanish, and our managing director, they're dealing with these multiple language, which isn't necessarily North America. And there's lots of other business reasons why people want to move things. So nonetheless, there is one individual that is responsible for coordinating that, and more importantly, setting the expectation of when we'll make changes, which we will only do annually, which was an agreement that we had to reach because everyone wanted to make changes on the fly, and the methodology on how that change will be made and who makes that final decision with respect to whether it gets changed.
Got it. So the program itself, the reference data management program, is that owned in like the data office, or do you?
It's all within the COE. I have someone that's a data governance lead.
Okay.
So that data governance lead is working with all the data stewards on a
Perfect.
daily basis. They have, regular meetings, and that's really, really important to us, because the other thing that we're doing is we're building out this data marketplace. And the data marketplace, the goal with the data marketplace is multifold, but one of those is for self-service. And with that self-service, we want individuals with functions to be able to put together dashboards. We also want them to be able to access these other data sets. And it's really, really important that people understand the business definitions and the data definitions of those data sets they're going after, because if they're misinterpreted and they put a dashboard together, that could lead to misinformation. So it's really, really important that all these data stewards are working hand in glove. So if I'm a data steward in marketing, as an example, and I want to pull some certification information, we want to make sure that data steward in marketing is working with the data steward in certification to ensure that the data analysts don't misinterpret the data and deliver a dashboard which may be inaccurate.
Sounds good.
Hey, Mark, quick question. Your reference data, this is a system of record for each reference data set. Does that belong in function? And does the function itself have its own system for managing the reference data?
So no, they don't have I'm going to go backwards. They don't have their own system of record. We're delivering that sort of system of record, and it sits, in this case, it happens to sit in Calibra. Again, we're going to be moving that over, but I won't get into that over the next couple of months. So that is the system of record right now. And that's where people go to get that. But with respect to that data, every function, even I may own that reference data and have to orchestrate the changes to that, but that sits still within our enterprise governance tool, but they are the effective owners of that data. Now, over time, we may end up making changes to the system of record over time. We may end up putting it into sort of a Cosmos database. We may end up putting APIs, and that's how people will access that data. That may be the system of record. However, the way we make changes to that could be through our data governance tool, or MDM, in the future. So that acts as a cleansing tool for that. And the real reason for that is some, real-time data that we want to send, and consistency on how we're developing our underlying technical architecture.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Follow-up question. You spoke, you did mention that you send the users to Udemy and they're trained, right? Can you talk a little bit more about the importance of the user training, and how did that play an impact in sparking the collaboration between the technical teams and the to cleanse the data and actually get the whole program going?
Yeah, so one of the issues that a lot of organizations encounter when they go from a centralized to a federated model is it has a tendency of building up fiefdoms. And it also, there's a tendency is when you have this federated model, it could potentially encourage the spokes to say, geez, you know what? I want to sort of do my own thing. And the people at the hub are sitting there trying to govern versus trying to contribute. So that was really important that we avoided that problem from occurring. And it all comes down to relationships at the end of the day. So my key focus is as we move to this hub and spoke, which is the thing that I recommended, how do we ensure a real tight relationship between the hub and the spoke and all the other spokes? And one of the ways that we dealt with that is, rather than trying to govern, what about if we train these people up as much as we can, and we establish a trust model with them, so that they're coming to us as consultants, as an advisors, and that way, when it comes to reference data, when it comes to building out visualizations, we've got a real healthy organization that's collaborating with one another. So the data analysts even when they're training, these are lengthy training programs, we bring them together. So what we'll find is not only building a good relationship with us, we're finding each of the functions are collaborating together. So when we've got this issue of something that needs to be an enterprise asset, like a reference data table, they're all singing on the same page. There's this trust relationship and personal relationship we've established that's helped us address some of the challenges and problems other organizations have encountered when they've gone to a federated model and they need to make some really potentially tough decisions and agree on something which seems as innocuous as these job titles, but it's really not unless you've built that relationship and trust amongst the parties and say, okay, yeah, I can accept the fact that this function is going to be owning this thing and orchestrating that. And even though they don't work in my function, I can trust that from an enterprise perspective, we'll get to the right place. Did I answer that question for you okay?
You did. Thanks for that. The Udemy is an online course, correct?
Yeah. So one of the things that we did is we've trained over 100 people on visualization. And the cost of this course is $12. Now that's for the basic and the fundamental. So we absolutely are also looking to be cost effective. And we found that says we could try and build our own course, or we can leverage this course for $12, and we use that as the foundation. So what'll happen is in this course, for Tableau, which is very, very good. So I end up taking all these courses in advance and working with the team to select those. It allows us to have a really nice structure of how we're training. And again, in this case, they already have some test data. So the individuals can start building out their Tableau, building out their dashboard. Say, okay, well, now you're going to learn bar graphs. Now you're going to learn how to join data. Now you're going to learn how to deal with temporal data. It'll take them through that exercise so they can go home, and it's really nice. It's got video and it's got lessons. And then we bring them back probably about 8 times during that 6-week period. And they'll share what they learned, but they says, okay, now what you're going to do is based on what you learned, I'm going to say bar graphs team says, now what you're going to do is I'm pointing you now to the following PMI data. You're now going to build your bar graph on that. And it's amazing. They all forget. They literally forget what they've learned. And, but then they all sort of work together to solve some of these problems. And they see us as advisors to them and being the key consultants they can go to for support. Yeah, so it's a really nice, inexpensive way to train and educate. And it's turned out to be really powerful for us.
Right. So also you had the blend of using the Udemy, but you were always still centralized in a room, being able to build those relationships.
Yeah, because we're finding if they just take the course and then we say, what we did find is, okay, you take the course, oh, by the way, here's the data go after, all that learning sort of falls apart. It's really interesting. Not all of them, but I'd say 60 or 70%. It's just like, oh, I forgot what I learned. So once we actually work with them on actually using it for real life business problems that they have to deal with, that works out well. And it also allows them to build a trust relationship with us. And then also recognize when they've got more advanced type of dashboards that need to be built, they'll come to us. We'll build that in cooperation with them. We probably do 85% of the work, and then we transfer the knowledge and transfer the dashboards over to them. So when individuals have questions, they want to make minor modifications to the dashboards, they go to them, which means my core team of really very strong visualization engineers don't find themselves in a maintenance mode.
Yeah, okay, very nice. Yeah, and I know the reason that I'm asking that too is as we start moving into more distributed and remote type working style, how will you foresee that this will transform in future?
Right. And again, if you want to talk more about that, just shoot me a LinkedIn. I'll have the individual talk to you that's actually doing the training. They can tell you what that journey's been like over 2 years and how they trained 100 people and what they found worked or not worked, if you're interested.
Oh, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any additional questions?
Mark, how are you?
Hi, Amy. How are you?
Good. So this level of maturity that you've achieved at PMI is hard to achieve, and many organizations try to get there. And it takes a very strong vision and communications to bring an organization along to get to where you have gotten. How long did it take you to get here?
I've been there 2.5 years now. And Amy, you bring up a really, really important point. The first thing that I end up doing is sharing a vision and cooperatively developing a strategy. And it included all the key functions. So what I find is I want everyone's fingerprint on everything that I've done. And more importantly, I want them to think that they've actually done, that they've developed and owned it. Because once they do that, then that builds that relationship and trust. And it's something that they can go to their executive manager and say, hey, look what I did. I frankly don't care where it comes from. I'm a consultant at heart, sort of what Amy is, sort of your background is. And once you've developed that strategy they can all rally behind, and once you've built that trust with them that says, hey, this person isn't taking over my space or cooperating, collaborating with me, you can go a long way. And the other thing I would say is we're not a huge organization. Now, if I wanted to do some of the same at Shire and some of the other organizations, it probably would take longer. And some of it may not be achievable. And the reason I'm saying it may not be achievable, because a lot of that has to do with what is that relationship at the most executive level with these different business functions. If that relationship is broken, and in some ways are being encouraged to do their own thing, it could be problematic. In this case, if you have the CEO saying, hey, look it, and sometimes it shows, I want this enterprise dashboard, and I want to see every one of the products that are there. I want to be able to click by region, and I want to see exactly how they're performing. We can do that, and we have delivered that. If you didn't have that structure where all these different presidents are working on their own, or potentially if it's operating as a holding company, you may not be able to achieve that. So that's some of the realities of the situation. You have to understand sort of, as you understand this, Amy, sort of what's your starting point. And one of the areas that attracted me to going to PMI after Shire, when I didn't want to move, that's why I left Shire to begin with, because I wanted me to move. But what attracted me to PMI says, you know what? They're going to spend the money they need to spend. That was the first question. This is how much it's going to cost. And number two, do you have an organizational structure that allow this to thrive? And you know what? They had both. And to me, if you had neither, you'd probably have a challenge.
Well, kudos to you on your vision, because otherwise it's like herding cats. And I share your value of having people take ownership, because if they don't, it's never going to succeed. So you did a great job in 2.5 years.
Well, thanks, Amy. I have a really, really solid team, so I really should be thanking them. I sort of just get to work with them, but yeah, it's really worked out very well for us. But thank you.
Thanks for sharing this with us too.
I know, my pleasure. Any additional questions? I guess I got 1 minute left, right? I'm done at 11:50, then they pull the hook on me. So any final question?
I think you were pretty clear. So you were providing a lot of helpful information. The thing too is people will probably ask for your slide. I think you wanted to be reached out directly. So maybe that's something that, I don't know if all your contact information is up there. No, we should put it on our website.
Yeah, absolutely. And please, again, as an association, we really do look to share information and build relationship with other companies, because that's how we find we'll be successful and others will. And that's the key goal of our association, is to help our members and the companies that we support. So yeah, please reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. And I'm sure you can teach me a lot of things also. And that's what I'm looking forward to.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, thanks for everyone's time today. And, you invested 15 minutes with me, and I hope you got something of value out of it. So thank you.
Thank you again too.
Definitely.
Again,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
We'll now stop sharing once I figure out where my cursor is. Okay. There we go.
Did our Robert Half friends ever join? I still don't see them on the call. Did you happen to hear anything from them, Chantel or Amy or anybody?
No, they would have not contacted me directly, so probably
Okay.
Evan. So I haven't heard anything.
Yeah, and I didn't get anything back from Evan either. Is there anybody on our call from Robert Half that wanted to give a brief presentation? Nope. Okay. Well, I do want to thank Robert Half for sponsoring the meeting today. And I want to thank everybody for sticking with us through the technical difficulties throughout the beginning of our meeting. And we do look forward to seeing you back in December for our data governance presentation. Thank you again and have a great day.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Thanks,
Does
everybody.
anybody
Take
have
care.
questions? Does anybody have
you.
questions for the next meeting, or we're good as of now?
I think we're good.
Thanks much. Bye all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.